I still remember the smell of sugar and cinnamon that drifted through the kitchen every morning before school. That bakery wasn't just where we worked, it was where we lived, laughed, argued, cried. It was where I learned to braid dough before I could braid my hair. My name is Everleigh Carson, and for most of my life, I believed that someday, the bakery would be mine. My father taught me everything: how to build flavor, how to fix a broken oven with duct tape and hope, and most of all, how to make people feel seen with a warm pastry in hand. He used to say, "You've got the hands of a baker and the heart of a leader, Ev. One day, this will all be yours." I clung to those words like scripture. But when cancer took him, those words didn't matter. Because the moment the funeral ended, my mother changed. Her grief hardened her. She stopped smiling, stopped baking, and started controlling everything, including me. At the reading of the will, I sat beside my younger sister, Harper, the Instagram perfect, never worked a shift in her life daughter. She scrolled through her phone while the attorney read the terms. The Carson family bakery and all associated property is hereby passed to Everleigh Carson to be managed at her discretion. I blinked. I stared at my mother. Surely this was a mistake. Surely he wouldn't. But she didn't even flinch. No shock. No sadness. No apology. Just a satisfied nod. I stood up. "This can't be right." He said, he promised. She cut me off coldly. "Your father made the final decision. And you're grown now. It's time you figured things out on your own. No explanation. No share. No legacy. Just exile." Harper smirked like she'd won something on a reality show. "Maybe you can bake for me, Ev. I'll pay you, eventually." I left that day with nothing but my keys, a single worn apron, and a lump in my throat that wouldn't go away for weeks. I cried in my car until my chest hurt. But not because I lost the business. Because I realized I'd never really had my mother's love to begin with. That night, I booked a one-way bus ticket out of town to a city where no one knew me, where I didn't have to explain how it felt to be erased. I told myself I would rebuild. Not out of spite, but because deep down, I knew that one day, they'd regret thinking I was the one who needed them. Because when I returned, I wouldn't come back as their daughter. I'd come back as their competition. The city didn't welcome me with open arms. It was loud, unforgiving, and far too expensive for someone with nothing but a backpack, a worn-out resume, and a recipe notebook that still smelled like flour. I slept on a friend's couch for the first 2 weeks. Her name was Lila, a college acquaintance who barely remembered me but didn't ask too many questions. That was exactly what I needed. I applied to every bakery, cafe, and corner coffee shop within walking distance. Some never replied. Others looked at my hands, cracked, raw from years of kneading dough, and assumed I was past my prime. Finally, a small family-owned cafe called Maple and Steam gave me a chance. The owner, Joni, was kind. No nonsense, gray hair in a braid, eyes that saw through everything. She handed me a flour-stained apron and said, "Let's see what your cinnamon rolls can do." I stayed up all night perfecting my father's old recipe, adding a twist of cardamom and orange zest, something I'd always wanted to try back home, but never had the nerve. When Joni took the first bite, she closed her eyes and muttered, "That's not just good. That's home." I was hired on the spot. The job didn't pay much, but it gave me something more important, a place to begin again. Every day before sunrise, I showed up. I baked. I tested. I watched customers' faces light up with one bite. And slowly, I started saving. Every tip. Every bonus. Instead of blowing it on nights out or distractions, I poured it into a folder I labeled, "Someday." Lila moved in with her boyfriend, and I rented the tiniest studio imaginable, barely big enough for a bed and a mini fridge. But I turned one corner into a test kitchen. I scribbled notes on flavor pairings, branding sketches, packaging ideas. I created what my mother had refused to see, a future that didn't need their approval. I called my concept Rise and Bloom, because that's what I was doing, rising from nothing, blooming where I was never planted. I didn't post about it online, didn't tell Harper, didn't reach out to my mother. Let them think I vanished. Let them feel the silence. Because the day I made noise again, they'd never be able to ignore it. My business was born out of midnight hours and secondhand ovens. Rise and Bloom wasn't a storefront, not yet. It was a vision baked in silence, fueled by bruised pride and a hunger that no bread could satisfy. I rented space in a shared commercial kitchen during off hours, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., when the city slept and my hands came alive. I started with cinnamon rolls, just like Dad taught me. But they were different now, infused with lavender, maple glaze, dark chocolate. I didn't just bake. I crafted. Each piece was a protest in sugar and spice. Joni let me sell them quietly at Maple and Steam on weekends, without her logo. Just a little corner tray, she said with a wink. Let the people decide. They sold out before noon. The next weekend, I doubled the batch. Same result. Customers began asking for the Bloom rolls. Some tried to special order. Others asked where the bakery was located. There was no bakery. Not yet. But in that quiet demand, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging. Not to a family name. Not to a town that turned its back on me. But to something I'd built myself. One morning, after a late shift, I walked past a rundown storefront tucked between a laundromat and an abandoned florist's shop. The windows were dusty, the door crooked. But I saw the bones. High ceilings. Exposed beams. Room for ovens. The lease was brutal. The renovation costs worse. But I didn't flinch. I signed it with shaking hands and an unshakable heart. I didn't announce it. No launch post. No family email. I just got to work. Nights turned into weeks. I painted walls, installed counters, and tested recipes till my hands blistered. Lila showed up on weekends to hang shelves and bring coffee. Joni sent one of her dishwashers on his days off to help with tiling. I paid everyone. Fairly. Fully. No IOUs. Because this bakery wasn't built on favors. It was built on the back of a girl everyone told to figure it out. And now, she was. Silently. Steadily. Beautifully. By the end of the season, Rise and Bloom was ready to open. And I had one last idea that made me smile. The grand opening would fall on the anniversary of my father's passing. Because he may have left me nothing on paper, but he'd left me everything that mattered in flour and fire. The morning of the grand opening, I stood outside Rise and Bloom in a soft gray apron and stared at the gold-lettered sign on the door. It didn't scream. It didn't need to. It stood like me, calm, clear, and impossible to ignore once you saw it. People lined up by 7 a.m. Some had followed the quiet buzz on local foodie blogs. Others just saw a line and got curious. By 8:30, we were sold out of every roll, tart, and brioche twist I'd prepped. By noon, I had 3 reporters' cards in my pocket and a voicemail from a regional food magazine. It was overwhelming, but not surprising, because I had baked every layer of that success with intention. I didn't post about the bakery, didn't tag the location. I let it grow organically, no loud promos, no desperate grasping, just one word-of-mouth whisper at a time. But word finds its way home. That night, I checked my inbox. Buried under catering inquiries and media requests was a name I hadn't read in a long time. Everleigh Carson. Subject: Is this your bakery? I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The next day, the bakery across town, my family's bakery, posted a story on their social media promoting a new seasonal roll. It was nearly identical to mine. Cinnamon, lavender, orange zest. They'd never used those flavors before. I showed it to Lila, who squinted and muttered, "What, did she send a spy or just taste and steal?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because that was the moment I knew. They saw me now, and it scared them. Not because of competition, but because I had become everything they thought I'd fail at without their help, approval, or permission. I wasn't just a baker anymore. I was a brand. A name people trusted. And now that name was whispered in the same breath as theirs. But I didn't want whispers. I wanted storms. And they were coming. It was a rainy Thursday when Harper showed up. I was behind the counter, guiding one of my junior bakers through a new pastry fold, when the doorbell chimed and in walked the last person I expected to see. She looked the same, perfectly polished, tailored coat, flawless hair, like she'd just walked out of a lifestyle magazine. But her eyes, they flicked around the shop, reading every detail like a threat. She didn't smile, didn't pretend, just stood there, dripping confidence and something else. Uncertainty. I stepped out from behind the counter, wiped my hands, and met her gaze. "Didn't think you liked this side of town," I said, calm but firm. "I saw the article," she replied, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. Foodie Digest. "You really landed a full-page spread." "Guess they liked the rolls," I said with a slight shrug. She gave a tight-lipped smile. "You always were good in the kitchen. Just lacked direction." I let that hang in the air. Then I leaned in slightly. "Funny. I remember someone else being given all the direction in the world and still managing to lose half of Dad's regulars." Her smile faded. She stepped closer to the counter, eyeing the line forming behind her. People whispered. Some recognized her. One even pulled out their phone. "I didn't come to fight," she said, voice lower now. "Mom's been talking about selling." I blinked. "The bakery?" She nodded. "Foot traffic's down. Costs are up. Staff turnover's ridiculous. That tends to happen when you run a place like a fashion brand instead of a family." She sighed. "Look, I was thinking, maybe we partner. Combine our names. You've clearly built something." "No." She froze. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I just smiled gently, cleanly. "No," I repeated. "I didn't build this to share it with someone who only sees value now that it's profitable. I built this because I had no one." Harper's jaw clenched. "You don't have to be spiteful." "I'm not," I said quietly. "I'm finally being honest. Something our family never mastered." She looked around again. At the people. The press clippings on the wall. The signature box of Rise and Bloom pastries being bagged at the register. And I watched the moment she realized. I had become everything she was trying to imitate. Without her. Without them. Without compromise. She left without saying goodbye. And I didn't watch her go. Because I wasn't looking back anymore. 3 weeks passed before it happened. The bell above the door rang again, and I turned, expecting another customer eager for the new rose honey croissants we'd just debuted. But it wasn't a customer. It was Harper again. And this time, she brought Mom. I stood frozen, a tray of hot scones cooling beside me. My mother looked older than I remembered. Her silver hair was tucked under a stiff hat, and her lips were pursed in that way she always wore when she didn't want to show discomfort. But her eyes moved around the bakery with something I couldn't place at first. Then I realized what it was. Recognition. This time, I didn't step forward. I let them come to me. Harper did the talking, all smooth charm and false humility. "We wanted to try your pastries. Everyone's been raving about them." Mom stayed quiet. She didn't meet my eyes. She looked unsure. I boxed up 2 croissants and placed them gently on the counter. "On the house," I said. "Wouldn't want you to think I'm still bitter." Harper smiled, but her eyes flashed. Mom finally spoke. "This place, it reminds me of your father." I paused, hands still. "Not the design," she added quickly, "but the warmth." That word. Warmth. Coming from the woman who once told me I was too soft to lead. She took a slow breath. "I know I didn't handle things well after he passed. I was grieving. We all were." I didn't reply. Harper jumped in. "The family bakery's up for sale. We thought maybe you'd want it. As a second location." I looked at them. Not as mother and sister, but as women who had spent years underestimating me, and were now standing in the light I built with my own hands. I spoke slowly, calmly. "No." Harper blinked. "It's a smart investment. I'm not interested in buying back what should have been mine to begin with." They both froze. "I didn't build Rise and Bloom to come back and fix the past," I said. "I built it to move beyond it." My mother opened her mouth, closed it again. Finally, she whispered, "You've done well, Everleigh." It was the closest thing to pride I'd ever heard from her. But it didn't change anything. As they left, croissant box in hand, I saw my reflection in the window behind them. Apron dusted with flour. Sleeves rolled up. Quiet strength in my posture. And I smiled. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't want what they had. I had something better. Peace. A few days later, Joni came into the bakery holding a local newspaper, folded at the business section. "You've seen this?" she asked, tapping the page. I took it from her. There it was, a bold headline: "Carson Family Bakery Faces Closure Amid Financial Trouble." The article was brief but brutal. Rising debts, declining sales, poor management. The words read like a list of everything I'd warned them about years ago. They were seeking buyers. Desperate ones. I stood at the register with the paper in my hand and something in my chest that felt heavy, but not sad. Joni glanced at me. "You okay?" I nodded. "I'm more than okay." That night, I stayed late at Rise and Bloom and ran the numbers. My second location fund was nearly ready. I'd been scouting a space downtown, but suddenly an idea bloomed like steam from a fresh loaf. Why build another bakery when I could buy the one they stole from me? Not to revive it, not to honor some romantic memory, but to make it mine truly, finally. I called their lawyer the next morning. He didn't recognize my name until I repeated it slowly. "Everleigh Carson," I said. "I'm interested in purchasing the Carson Family Bakery." There was a long pause. Then, "Understood. Are you representing a company or?" "I own Rise and Bloom." Silence again. Then urgency. "We'd be happy to set up a viewing. The family would prefer a private arrangement." I chuckled under my breath. Of course they would. We scheduled the meeting in a neutral location. No nostalgia. No emotion. When Harper walked into the conference room and saw me sitting at the head of the table, her face tightened. "Seriously?" I smiled calmly. "You said you wanted a buyer." Mom sat next to her, quiet again, watching me. This time, there was no need to explain myself. They knew exactly what I had become. I placed the contract on the table. No sentiment. No photos. Just terms. The price was fair. Generous, even. But I added one clause. All signage must be removed. The Carson family name is retired. Permanently. Harper scoffed. "You're erasing us?" I looked her in the eye. "I'm just finishing what you started." They signed. Not out of grace. Out of necessity. And as I walked out of that room, deed in hand, I didn't feel rage or vengeance. I felt relief. Because I had reclaimed the place they used to define me. And now, it would carry my story. Not theirs. The keys felt lighter than I expected. They jingled in my palm as I stood in front of the building I once considered home, staring at its tired, faded sign. Carson Family Bakery, since 1978. Paint chipped. Windows dull. The charm I remembered was long gone, replaced by years of neglect disguised as tradition. Behind me, traffic moved on. People walked past without looking twice. No one paused to admire what had once been the heartbeat of a neighborhood. But I paused, because I wasn't here to relive memories. I was here to rewrite them. Inside, the space smelled like old flour and something sour, like disappointment baked too long. I walked through every inch. The counters where I'd once stood as a child, handing Dad cookie sheets. The corner where I used to sit doing homework. The back office where I once overheard my parents arguing over bills. The past whispered from every wall. And for a brief second, I almost let it win. But then I pulled out the new blueprints. This wouldn't be a resurrection. It would be a reinvention. I brought in my team from Rise and Bloom. Architects. Designers. Joni, of course, her insight was gold. We gutted it. Tore down the faux brick wall. Opened the kitchen. Added skylights. The neighborhood took notice. A few familiar faces passed by, staring through the construction tarps. One older man tapped the glass and asked, "You bringing the old place back?" I smiled. "No, I'm building something better." He nodded. About time. The day the new sign went up, it was early morning. A soft spring breeze. Dust still settling. And there it was, hanging bold and clear in white script. Bloom House Bakery. Built on legacy. Grown with love. It didn't just erase the past. It honored the parts that deserved to live, and buried the ones that didn't. I stood across the street, coffee in hand, as people stopped to read the new name. Some smiled. Some tilted their heads. One even took a photo. That night, Harper sent another message. No subject. No words. Just a broken heart emoji. I didn't reply, because I wasn't interested in reopening old wounds. I was healing by planting something new on top of the ashes. And for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. Not because I won, but because I no longer needed their version of victory. It wasn't long before Bloom House Bakery became the talk of the town. Lines wrapped around the block on weekends. Influencers dropped by for honey basil cruffins and matcha glaze loaves. A local food critic gave it 5 stars and called it a soulful blend of innovation and memory. I received emails from corporate investors. Some wanted to franchise. Others offered to buy me out. I declined every one. This wasn't built for money. This was built for me. Then came the local awards ceremony, the annual Women in Small Business Gala. I was nominated for Entrepreneur of the Year. I almost didn't go. Not because I doubted myself, but because I didn't want to sit in a room full of applause that once seemed impossible. But Lila practically dragged me there. "You deserve to take up space," she said, pinning a gold brooch on my dress. "Especially in rooms where they once shut the door on you." That landed harder than she knew. The ballroom shimmered with soft light. Tables draped in ivory. Women in gowns, heels clicking, voices rising like champagne fizz. My table was near the front, reserved for finalists. As I sat down, I noticed a familiar figure a few tables away. Mom. Next to her, Harper. I blinked, stunned. I hadn't invited them. Hadn't told them about the nomination. I didn't need them there. And yet, they came. I turned away. When my name was announced as the winner, I rose slowly. Calm. Composed. Applause surrounded me. Flashbulbs blinked. I walked to the podium, the award in my hand feeling strangely light. I took a deep breath. I wasn't born into this space. I built it. I didn't inherit a business. I created a vision. I was told to figure it out, so I did. And this is the result. A pause. To anyone who's ever been told they're not enough, let this be proof. You don't need permission to bloom. The room erupted. But I didn't look toward the table where my mother sat. Because this moment wasn't about them. It was about me finally taking the seat I had earned, at a table they never made room for. Weeks after the gala, I received an envelope in the mail. Cream-colored, heavy, with gold embossed lettering. Hartford Commercial Property Association. Inside was a formal request. The Carson family bakery building, what was once their pride, then their burden, now mine, had been nominated for historic district recognition because of its revival. Bloom House Bakery wasn't just a shop anymore. It was a landmark. That same week, a woman walked into the bakery, asking if I'd consider hosting a mentorship brunch for young girls who wanted to start their own businesses. "They'd love to hear your story," she said. My story. Not Harper's. Not Mom's. Mine. I agreed. We held it in the upstairs loft of the bakery, renovated with soft seating, journals, sunlight, and freshly baked orange vanilla scones. When I spoke, I saw girls with wide eyes and eager hearts. And I realized the revenge wasn't just success. It was impact. Then one Monday, a delivery came from my accountant. Payroll checks for our 15 employees, bakers, dishwashers, packagers, assistants. Bloom House was thriving. As I flipped through the envelopes to review signatures, I paused. One of the names caught my eye. Harper Carson. A part-time vendor through a supplier we'd acquired. Unintentional, but poetic. I stared at the amount. Modest, nothing special. But at the bottom, in bold ink, was my name. Everleigh Carson. Owner. Founder. CEO. I laughed. Not out of spite, but with something softer. Peace. I didn't change her job. Didn't fire her. Didn't gloat. Because this wasn't her ending. It was mine. And it ended not with a scream, but with a signature. The same one they said would never matter. The same one now printed on the paychecks of those who once told me to figure it out. I had. And it tasted a lot like victory. Glazed in honey, filled with purpose, and baked in the fire they thought would destroy me.